I guess you put it on pause.
Crank it up here. Crank it up.
I think maybe it's easier to upload shorter videos.
Thanks, thanks everybody for coming. Thanks Ted, and Jeff, and James, Jeff for invoking the other species that we share this planet with, and James for his warrior energy. Well, I wrote down a few things that I wanted to say last night, late last night, and a little bit this morning, so I can't really guarantee to you that it's the best of my thinking, but it's very fresh. So, I wanted to really start by pointing out that we live in a bubble. We literally live in a bubble, right? And this is not the economic bubble that they talk about on the nightly news, right? If you think of the depths of the fertile soil and you think of the top of the breathable air, right? We live in the bubble, and that's the biosphere, and that's the life support systems of the planet, right? We all know that they have limits. There are planetary boundaries, literally, right? And you can break it down differently, but there are 9 key aspects, and climate is one of the 9 key aspects of the planetary boundaries. And I believe that we have to reverse the really frightening greenhouse gas buildup. It's now 400 parts per million, right? We have to reverse that and get back to pre-industrial levels of 280 parts per million. That's really the assignment at large. That's the plan commensurate with the scale of the problem that we have to get to, right? That was the natural balance of greenhouse gases before industrial civilization started to muck it up, right? Now, to do this, it's going to take more than just getting off of fossil fuels, and it's going to take more than just, supplanting that with renewable energy. We have got to change the economic model, right, as James spoke to. We've got to halt all deforestation and double the native forest canopy to scrub that many parts per million of greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere. We've got to shift from industrial soil-destroying agriculture completely to ecological farming, agroecology, which builds carbon back into the soils, right? And that'll scrub so many more parts per million back out of that. So that's the task at hand, as I see it. But we also have to stop the over-polluting sort of over-consuming, over-polluting top billion people. We have to help them get to a humble, one planet living, low impact lifestyles. That's part of the task at hand as well. We have to address that issue head on, right? So we gather here today, right? And the larger assignment is really to build a more socially just and ecologically sustainable or ecologically sane world, right? Yeah. And we are today at the World War II Monument. We are in the Washington Mall, and so we ought to give a little bit of thanks to those founding fathers. But wouldn't it have been nice if some of those founding fathers, other than the ones you mentioned, would have put something into our deepest legal documents, the Constitution itself, about the value of nature, about the fundamental interrelationship between humanity and nature. There are some constitutional changes that, as you all know, that we need, but that is one of them, right? So if they had put that view of the world, their worldview in that sense, into the Constitution, we would not be in the mess that we are today. So, but what is a worldview? I looked that up, and it's in simple sense, a worldview is our constellation of beliefs. It's our constellation of all of our deeper values, that package of values that we all embody. And the importance of it is it really gives meaning to our life in different ways. The worldviews of people around the world, our worldviews, it gives meaning to our life and our time on this planet, right? And so I need not remind you all here today about the millions of people who are out there who are happy that you are taking action and you are expressing your worldview today. But it's not just the millions and billions, in fact, of people that we speak for, but it's also those millions of other species that Jeff referred to, because they can't speak in the halls of Congress. They can't march, literally, to the White House, right? And, the whales couldn't speak in the corporate boardrooms of the transnationals that were killing them. And so Greenpeace did that on their behalf, right? The mighty Amazon couldn't go to the World Bank and the World Trade Organization and speak on its own behalf. behalf. So groups like Rainforest Action Network did that. And you all here today are really speaking on behalf of this blue sky. And that's very powerful. It's very important that we do that we speak on behalf of these other aspects of nature, right? We don't want to kid ourselves about this moment in time. This is a dangerous and a difficult situation. We're in a real fix. We have had to call this mobilization out to order and declare something akin to this World War II strategy, right? And we need to continue to ask ourselves, do we really have a plan to get the job done? You know, do we have a strategy commensurate with the scale of this problem and the timing of the problem, which was brought up also by our other speakers, right? And so we know that this climate fight is bigger than, as I mentioned, bigger than just getting off of fossil fuels. It's bigger than just the renewable energy, right? We have to humble humanity really to the ways of nature. We have to build this more socially just and ecologically sound society, and that's the moment in time that we are in. And we are going to need, frankly, I believe, some windows of opportunity to open up that aren't open right now. You know, as James mentioned, you know, and Jeff as well. You know, the White House is our friend, but not sufficiently so, right? And other windows need to open up as well. So, how do we get this done? How do we do this differently? How do we create some great societal U-turn in this fundamentally different direction, right? Do we have a plan? Do we have a strategy? The one way to think about a worldview is that our worldview, our view of the world, is part of our strategy, right? Because our view of the world, if one were to synthesize it, would be to say that, you know, we are for all people and all species in a mutually interdependent world. That's the view of the world. And that's a powerful strategy. But there's another very powerful strategy at foot with the climate movement, and that's simply to shift the money out of the bad and into the good. Right? What is the divestment campaign? What are the stranded asset aspects of the campaign? It's really about just stop funding the bad socially and ecologically, and start funding the good socially and ecologically. So I believe that we have, in fact, a plan for this great U-turn, right? And it's indeed more than fossil fuels and renewable energy, though those are critical components that we must have. It's also about changing the economic system itself, the model of itself. It's about better banking, and it's about better relationships to our forests and better relationships to the food and agriculture, as I mentioned before, right? And I could go into some of the details of that plan, but I won't too much today. But I will simply say that all of the banks of the world could have internal procedures where they screen for what are called externalities, pollution externalities, that are off the books right now. A coal-fired power plant doesn't have to pay the hospital room bill for a mother with a child with asthma who gets rushed to that emergency room because of the
price on carbon.
They don't have to pay for the extinction of species and the threatened species that were mentioned earlier on. Those externalized costs are really just shifted costs. And as the great David Brower used to say, the problem with our economic model is that it doesn't account for the cost to the future and the cost to the earth. Well, we have to fix that, and we can fix that. Banks could have these internal procedures to identify those pollution externalities. Banks could contrast those pollution externalities to the 9 planetary boundaries like nitrogen and phosphorus cycles and see that industrial agriculture already has it off the charts, and it's created 400 dead zones around the planet. Those things can be fixed. Banks at some point simply have to stop funding these bad projects and start funding the ecologically restorative projects. And frankly, the bank loan officers will have to be incentivized to follow that kind of a plan if we hope to get the job done. But at some point, banks will wise up and start funding agroecology and protecting the world's forests and all of the other things that are needed, right? And we are taking these particular banking principles from Foundation Earth to the World Bank to the World Trade Organization, to the G20 and these other forums, and we're organizing on that level to confront this economic model directly, right? And I would want to go over just a couple of details from our Double the Forest Canopy initiative. Because again, if we're going to scrub so many parts per million out of the atmosphere, we have to halt all deforestation, and we need to double the native forest canopy to bring back the native species and the fecundity of that web of life. And that will remove so many parts per million, right? But to anyone who's seeking a socially just and ecologically sane world, doubling the native forest canopy will help us get there. And so we've launched, in part, a petition and a letter to the G20, and we've made points such as we simply know that forests are a fundamental expression of the natural world, and that they are key to supporting all life. And we've witnessed how the destruction of the world's forests degrades the quality of human life and undermines the prospects of a prosperous and vibrant economies. And we know that carbon-rich natural habitats are critical to the restoration of the natural climatic patterns, right? And we believe that we must reverse this frightening concentration and get back to pre-industrial levels, right? That dramatic mathematical U-turn is hope from preventing what's effectively turning our blue sky into a toxic furnace. We say things like global warming and climate change, but we are turning the blue sky into a toxic furnace, and that is not okay, right? So there's much more to that effect, or to that initiative, but I brought copies that you could read. But it's really about the great U-turn that we see. And let me just now shift to what some of you may fear deeply, I suspect, because I do from time to time, and that's, frankly, is it too late? I mean, has it gone too far? Is it too late? You guys know the science better than most people know the science, right? Have the positive feedback loops kicked in, the things about the Antarctic ice fields that we heard about earlier. And I'll just say about that one thing from my good friend up in Canada, the very smart and very wise plant geneticist David Suzuki, who said, you know, we humans just aren't smart enough to know if it is too late. And so at the very least, we want to go down swinging. We want to go down swinging with a strategy and a plan commensurate with the scale of the problem. And I believe getting back to 280 parts per million is one way to express that. So in conclusion, yeah, we're standing here today inside our bubble under this beautiful blue sky, and we're ready to march, right? But we march because we want to protect what we love. And so we have to invoke within ourselves that sort of love from our heart that will drive us over to the White House, right? And this climate fight, in my mind, symbolizes this great societal U-turn in this fundamentally different direction to a more socially just and ecologically sound society. And it's very important that we have this march today. These marches add up. I know from my history on the civil rights movement, I know from the women's movement, and from the 1990s and the Save the Rainforest movement, that we can get this kind of mobilization on the agenda of the planet. And that this march today is important to that process. So I want to simply thank you all for coming today. Thank you for being a part of this march, and thank you all very much for having me speak.